kind enough to join us once again with so much happening is Sports Illustrated's Albert Breer. Good to see you, Bert. How are you, buddy?
Hey, Rich. How we doing? Sorry, I was coming in hot. Got caught in a little traffic on the way home.
Oh, no kidding.
Oh, no.
Yeah. It's there was, I think, like when there's even the prospect of a snowstorm now up here, which you're a native to the Northeast, a lot of people get on the roads. And I don't know if they're emergency shopping at the grocery store or whatever, but yeah, it was pretty busy out there.
Well, from what I hear, what's coming to New England, that there's gonna be a captive audience for sure for the AFC Championship game with the snow hitting. But before we get to anything for championship weekend, I would love to know your thoughts, backstory of the firing of Sean McDermott that led to a press availability of owner Terry Pegula and the new GM / president of football operations of the Buffalo Bills in Brandon Beane. What led to all of that? What do you have?
Yeah, so I think what you've seen over the last week is a lot of the tension and pressure that was on everybody over the course of the last 3 or 4 months spilling out. I don't think, and you can see it by the way their interviews list has been kind of cobbled together now. I don't think that there was any major discussion between ownership and anybody else in that building about doing this. Yet, I think as November became December, as December became January, as the AFC bracket materialized, and there's no Joe Burrow in there, there's no Lamar Jackson in there, most of all, there's no Patrick Mahomes in there. There was just this tension and pressure that didn't exist before in that building. And I think, when you look at Josh Allen's emotion coming out of the game, when you look at Sean McDermott's reaction to the officiating coming out of the game, and now this with Terry Pegula, it's almost like all of that has spilled out. This has been, I think, one of the most well-run organizations in the sport over the last 9 years since Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane got there. And so, to me, it's really eye-opening watching that. It's like watching a car crash in real time, over the last few days there. And so they still have good people there, and I trust they get it right. But the optics of it aren't good. Throwing a player who's still on your roster and Keon Coleman under the bus the way that they did. And I think, I don't think it was all that graceful the way that Terry Pegula talked about Sean McDermott either. It kind of felt a little bit like you're kicking a guy when he's down, which I'm sure, if he had a second chance at that, maybe he would word some of the things a little bit differently. And then I think the optics of promoting Brandon Beane. I think Brandon Beane's one of the most capable general managers in all of football. However, you have to understand the way this is going to look, and I think of the scene from Office Space where I can't remember what the guy's name was, but the character, the main character in Office Space, and the other guys had just been let go, and they go to tell him, and then he's like, well, yeah, I got promoted. I know it's not fair. You know what I mean? Like, it just sort of felt that way. And the reality of it is, like, this is sort of a restructure for them. And they're going to what Pegula has in the NHL with the Sabres, and maybe what he's more comfortable with, which is you're going from having your coach and GM report to ownership to now having the coach report to the GM and the GM report to ownership. So they're restructuring a little bit here. At least that's the idea. We'll see we'll see whether or not, like, whoever the new coach is changes that at all. But a messy week altogether and a restructuring of the organization that's part of it. And it's hard not to think that when you listen to the words, right, and you listen to them say, like, what happened in Denver was the reason why, it sort of, I think, brings to light, just how tense and how scattershot everything's been there the last few days.
Because it does make it sound like it was an emotional decision rather than one that you normally take some time, clear heads, and things of that nature. And Pegula still seemed to be hot. He seemed to be not only hot about the way it ended in Denver, but also the way he's clearly attuned to narratives that have been ascribed to his general manager and one particular player, and Keon Coleman. And unfortunately for them, one of the more shared pieces of video I saw on socials yesterday, Albert, was the Hard Knocks, in which Brandon Beane is clearly on board with Keon Coleman, if not his own idea. But let's place that aside for the moment and say, so you're saying there's a new structure in Buffalo, basically the structure that John Harbaugh just undid with the Giants. So if Breer, I'm sorry, if Brian Daboll comes to Buffalo, he'd be familiar with that setup of reporting to the general manager. And is that part and parcel of what's going on there? I mean, Daboll would be a familiar choice, and one that I think maybe does need to be sold to the fan base in terms of his wins and losses. But what do you think, Albert?
It's kind of interesting because a couple of days ago I heard probably not, but I think Josh Allen's involvement in this is a factor, and Josh is very, very close with Brian Daboll. And so, I do think that they're going into this with an open mind, but you can clearly see like a lot of the guys that they're bringing in have connections. Joe Brady works there now, right? Mm-hmm. And then you have Brian Daboll, who was there this morning, and you have Anthony Lynn, who worked there previous to this regime. So like there's familiar faces that are coming in to interview there. And, so it kind of, that's why I said when they put this list together, it does feel a little bit like, all right, like we've got to kind of cobble something together and hustle something together and kind of collect what we're doing, because it just didn't feel like this is something where, okay, I'm pulling the list out of my drawer and it's been ready for 2 months and here we go, and obviously they're later, and part of that is, the fact that they were in the second round of the playoffs, which puts them behind the other 9 teams that had openings. It's only 6 now, or it's only 5 now, but the other 9 teams that had openings had a jump start on them, or head start on them. So I think Daboll's candidacy is interesting because I think this is going to be a Josh Allen-centric hire. I would also say that this is a golden opportunity for them. And I think all those guys realize that you may never have this sort of carrot to put in front of coaching candidates before, where you've got Josh Allen a few months from his 30th birthday, in the prime of his career. He's the best player in the sport. You're going into a new stadium. I mean, if you're doing this again in 4 or 5 years, you don't know that Josh Allen's going to be still in the same state he is now based on the mileage he's already got on his body, so I think you have to treat this as a golden opportunity. So they're going to go through these interviews. Would I be surprised if you take a big swing? If they were to take a big swing, I wouldn't be surprised because that's what this sort of opportunity dictates, at least in my mind.
Albert Breer from Sports Illustrated is MMQB must read every single week here on the Rich Eisen Show. Who pops next? Ravens pop next? What's your general sense here?
I think like the Ravens situation is another one that's interesting. And I put them in the Steelers category in that one, they've made very successful off the board hires. John Harbaugh and Mike Tomlin were off the board hires, right? Like that wasn't anybody's hot candidate in 07 or 08. And they have a lot to sell. So this isn't like some sort of reclamation project for anyone coming in. And I think, the flip side of it is for that reason, the candidates have to fit them as much as, they have to build something for their coaching candidates. So I think it's at least interesting that Jesse Minter was just in there yesterday. Mm-hmm. He worked there before. They know him. They've been able to see Mike Macdonald's success in Seattle. Mike Macdonald and Jesse Minter worked together in Baltimore, and Minter succeeded Macdonald at Michigan and had similar success. And now Jesse Minter is canceling his interview at the Browns today. Just interesting. Minter also interviewed with the Raiders the day before that. There are Michigan connections there too with Tom Brady and John Spytek. So that's an interesting name. I think Brian Flores is seen as a program fit for Baltimore. Again, like I look at them as one, Clint Kubiak's another one that has some ties there. I think that's one where they can be patient and let the process play out. But it wouldn't shock me if, Jesse Minter wound up being the guy.
Yeah, that wouldn't shock me either. So who are the Browns looking at?
Well, I mean, like I think I felt like all along, like Jim Schwartz sort of had the inside track here. I think they want to keep Jim Schwartz in the building based on what they know about him. And if you really drill down, like if we're being fair about this, Jim Schwartz, his time in Detroit, his third year they broke through. He took over a winless team. His third year they break through and make the playoffs for the first time in forever. And I think what kind of took them down there was more a roster building thing than anything else. Like I think he had really believed that that he could make it work with kind of some wayward players. And they had a disastrous draft in 11 with Nick Fairley and Titus Young and Mikel LaSure, where that like Jeff Fisher Titans model didn't really work for them. But I think there's some merit to the idea of Jim Schwartz. And again, I think they'd like to keep him in the building in some capacity. And then you look at the young offensive names. Grant Udinski is going to be in there tomorrow, the Jaguars offensive coordinator. He's only 30. They're hoping for a chance to talk to Nathan Schiehlhaas, the Rams pass game coordinator, early next week when he's allowed to do a second interview with them. Mm-hmm. So I think Jim Schwartz, I think their preference is to have Jim Schwartz as part of the equation. And, I think it'll either be Jim Schwartz or one of these young offensive guys with Jim Schwartz as the defensive coordinator.
So let's talk Raiders, Albert. What's happening with them? Another Tom Brady hire with him in the mix, and they've got the first overall pick as well. So obviously that's going to be part of the interview process, visions of Fernando Mendoza, or who they think is the first overall pick. What are you hearing about the Raiders' approach here?
So they're very cognizant that the quarterback is going to have to be accounted for in all of this, right? Like, so that does not mean you have to hire an offensive coach. However, if Jesse Minter, who they like a lot, is going to get the job, there's going to have to be a detailed plan for, okay, here's our offensive coordinator, here's our quarterbacks coach, here's how we're going to bring them along. And when we lose our offensive coordinator, if that happens in a year or two, here's the guy who's going to replace him, who I'm going to put on my staff right now. I think it has to be something like that, right? For them to be convinced not to go with an offensive guy. So I think Minter is in the running, and presuming he has a plan for all of that, which he's really sharp and he's interviewed really well. I would think that box would be checked by him. I think he's in the running. Davis Webb, to me, might be the most interesting name, though. He's incredibly well thought of. He hasn't coached for very long is the problem, but he played in the league recently. He's, my understanding, got a passing relationship with Tom Brady, but he's got two offensive coordinator names that I know are on this list that have tight connections to Brady. And one is Brian Daboll, who could wind up going to Tennessee as the coordinator, could go to Buffalo as the head coach, but Brian Daboll's one name for Davis Webb. They were together both in New York and Buffalo when Davis was a player. And the other is Cliff Kingsbury, who almost went to Vegas a couple of years ago as a coordinator, who's tight with Brady. And so I think Davis Webb has a ton of head coach qualities. And I think part of it is the same thing with the Rams had with McVay, right? Which is, I remember talking to the Rams front office people when they hired Sean, and the whole thing was, well, we can hire him now a year early, or we just won't get him at all, because if he doesn't get a job this year, he's going to get one next year, and we're not going to be looking for one next year, right? So I think with Davis, that's part of the logic is, do we go in early on a guy, a year early with a guy, bring in an experienced offensive coordinator who can work with the quarterback, and just bet on this guy's upside? And so I think Davis Webb has a shot in Vegas under that sort of setup.
Albert Breer here on the Rich Eisen Show. All right, let's turn to Championship Sunday before I let you go on with the rest of your Thursday. Your opinion of Jarrett Stidham's readiness is what?
I've talked to a handful of people about him who've worked with him, coached him over the course of the last few days. So his story is fascinating. He had kind of a rough upbringing, was a blue chip high school quarterback at a Texas small school powerhouse, goes to Baylor, was going to be the guy there. Then he gets caught in the crossfire of the Art Briles thing. No fault of his own, of course, but winds up transferring to Auburn. Not a great system for a young quarterback there, but he makes it work. And then the Patriots gamble on him, and they take him in 19 with the idea this guy is going to be a good guy to have in the pipeline, sort of like Jimmy Garoppolo was a few years earlier. He had a chance to start in 20. He had a back injury that kind of limited him a little bit that offseason, and then COVID wiped out OTAs and minicamp, and then Bill goes and signs Cam Newton on July 1st, and the opportunity to start goes away. The Patriots then draft Mac Jones the next year. So that window that he had to become the starter there had shut. But Josh McDaniels still thought enough of him when he got to Vegas the next year to trade for him. And then they tried to bring him back the following year, but got outbid by Sean Payton, who brought him in as Russell Wilson insurance. And then Stidham stays the next year when Nix is drafted. And now they re-up with him again at 2 years and $12 million. So Sean Payton liked the idea that he can handle my offense because he's played for Josh McDaniels. I'm told he's been fantastic behind the scenes the last couple of years, a key part of Bo Nix's development and having the right sort of quarterback room. He's got swagger. He's got a skill set that's not that different than Nix's. Now, my question would be with Stidham, can he make the 4 or 5 throws at the end of the game that Bo Nix was making consistently? There's a reason why Bo Nix was coming back in all those games, 7 fourth quarter comebacks, another one in the playoffs. That broke a Broncos record, the franchise of John Elway and Peyton Manning, right? Nix was making those throws at the end of the game. So can Stidham make those throws? But I can just tell you, just talking to people, he's not going to shrink to this moment. Like what people who know him best and the people who've coached him say is if this guy makes a mistake, it might be a couple picks because of overconfidence. But he's going to go out there and sling it. And if Sean Payton makes this work and wins the Super Bowl for Jarrett Stidham, Sean Payton walks into Canton, I think. Okay. Don't you?
Of course. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So don't you think Sean Payton, you know Sean, I know Sean. Don't you think Sean would love to see to say to everybody right now, watch this?
Of course. Yeah, I mean, he'd love to do that, and he'd love a shot at the Rams, who, as you know, went to the Super Bowl in Atlanta rather than his Saints. Yep. You know, with the pass interference that wasn't called. I mean, his competitiveness and his sort of hackles are very we're familiar with it, and it's very famous. The bottom line, though, is the guy hasn't. I have the number right here. He hasn't thrown a pass in 749 days.
And that's the difference, right? Because that's the difference. Because like we can make the comparisons to Jeff Hostetler and Nick Foles and even Tom Brady, right? Sure, right. And Kurt Warner. Those guys all had runway, right? Like Warner, Trent Green got hurt in the summer. Yeah. Tom Brady, Drew Bledsoe got hurt in September. Like Foles and Hostetler are closer, but both those guys had regular season games that they started at the end of the year leading into the playoffs. So this is different. You know what I mean? Like this one is not the same as those. And that's why I can't wait to see how he plays, Rich. I mean, you like to see every team be at full strength, and that's not really possible because of the nature of the sport. And you certainly like to see the best quarterbacks going. But I just think this is a fascinating story. I mean, I just can't get out of my head how well Teddy Bridgewater played in an emergency situation for the Saints in 2019, went 5-0 when Drew Brees got hurt. I don't know if Jarrett Stidham would work for 17 games, as a starting quarterback for the Broncos. But do I think that Sean Payton might be able to make it work for 2? I mean, he might be able to.
What's your take on the NFC Championship game before I let you go?
Yeah, so I think that I think the Seahawks are the best roster left. I think they've shown that, right? Like, so we saw how complete they were. I mean, that the first quarter of that game against San Francisco was like the definition of complimentary football, that cliche, right? Like it was kick return for a touchdown, turnover on downs, offense cashes it in, turnover, offense cashes it in, right? So I think they're the most complete team left. I think like the Stafford these Rams are very different than the Rams that were there 4 years ago. And I think part of it is Sean McVay's reaction to Kyle Shanahan having his number. And he knew they had to get tougher, and he knew they had to get more rugged. And over the summers, in the last couple of summers, they've gotten, they've had longer practices. They've had more contact. They've invested in the lines of scrimmage. Kevin Dotson coming over from Pittsburgh to play at guard has become one of the best guards in football. They invested in Jonah Jackson. That didn't work out as much, but that was another investment up front. The defensive front, Verse, Fisk, Kobe Turner, Young, like all those guys are big, rugged guys. And they were built to beat the Niners. They're built to beat the Seahawks too, to stand up to a really tough Seahawks team. So I think if the Rams are going to win this game and beat a really, really good Seahawks team, the formula is going to be, let's turn this game into a street fight. and, we'll get to the point where there's 5 minutes left, and then number 9 goes down on the table as our trump card. It's a very different way that they won the Super Bowl 4 years ago, but I think there's a real path to victory there, and what's going to be an unbelievable environment for football.
All right, man. Stay warm. Stay out of the snow there.
Well, I'll be in Denver and then Alabama, so I'm actually missing it, but I appreciate your concern.
Oh, boy. Oh, yeah, man. Family minus dad without in a snowstorm. I got you.
Emily feels great about it. Let me tell you.
Listen, we all know who the all-star in that, the all-pro in that house is. Alabama is in reference to the Senior Bowl, correct?
Senior Bowl, that's right. Yeah.
Man, here we go. Here we go. It's that time of year. Well, obviously, look for my my request for your time from there too. As always,
you
Albert.
Got it.
Thanks, buddy. You be well.
All right. Thanks, Rich.
It's Albert Breer here on the Rich Eisen Show.
Yeah, Albert.
Hey, you made it all the way to the end. Thanks for that. Check us out every single day streaming live on Disney Plus and the ESPN app 12 to 3 Eastern.